Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Hope you're getting ready for the Thanksgiving weekend. I suppose people worldwide don't have Thanksgiving weekend, but that's okay. Black Friday exists worldwide, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. So today, we are going to be discussing 3 big exploits to use in small stakes games. As you can see here is me smiling. I love making big exploits. And in small stakes games, very often, it won't be all that difficult to spot them and then adjust your strategy to take advantage of the mistakes your opponents are making. So first off, what is an exploitative strategy and how do you go about using them? Well, GTO, game theory optimal strategies, are a great starting point, but if you want to make the most money in your games, you have to learn how to take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. And in this webinar, I'm going to teach you common leaks to look for in the small stakes games, and also exploits that you can immediately add to your game to make the most money at the table from these players. So, first off, what is an exploit? An exploit is an adjustment you make away from your default strategy to make more money than you would if you just played the game theory optimal strategy. So you may say, what is the game theory optimal strategy? Well, we discussed that thoroughly at pokercoaching.com. That's not going to be the discussion here because it takes it's a big concept, but there is a fundamentally sound strategy you can learn at poker that will make it to where your opponents are going to roughly break even or lose against you no matter what they do. But you should actually not use that strategy when your opponents are making mistakes, especially if you know what mistakes they're making, right? So if you pay attention and you see your opponents making an error, you can get out of line, deviate from game theory optimal strategy, and just really crush your opponents. So, exploit number 1. Against most players, you should value bet thinly on the river. And this is because small stakes players have 2 main leaks that allow us to do this. First, they do not check raise bluff often enough. I mean, ask yourself, last time you were playing small stakes games, when did you get check raised out of your seat on the river? You called and your opponent showed up with a bluff. Well, unless they are overly loose, overly aggressive, maniacal players, they are going to show you the nuts almost every time. Even in high stakes games, unless you're playing against someone who's just an absolute online crusher, when they check raise you on the river, they just have the nuts. Also, this is especially true in small stakes live cash games. Most players do not protect their passive actions often enough with strong hands properly, meaning whenever they check, it usually indicates weakness, and especially when they check call, that almost always indicates weakness. So when they check call your flop bet and your turn bet, which implies they did not raise, it usually means they do not have a range that contains the best hands, right? I mean, for example, say you raise from middle position, the big blind calls, flop comes king 9-8. They check, you bet, and they call. Immediately, you can be pretty sure they are never going to show up with a slow played pocket kings preflop, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, 9-8, king 9, king 8, right? So if the turn is a 2, you pretty much know your opponent has 1 pair, right? Which is great. That's going to allow us to value bet a little bit thinner, perhaps with something like king X on all 3 streets, because we know our opponent is going to have mostly a king or worse, right? So, understand that if you're using this exploit and get check raised, you need to fold almost your entire range, right? Say we do value bet thinly, and then our opponent does check raise us, or even say we value bet with like the 3rd nuts and our opponent check raises us, and you know they don't raise you very often unless they have a really premium hand, you should be folding the vast majority of the time. Now, of course, if your opponents know that you're going to be betting the river very thinly, and they do start check raising you a lot, stop value betting thinly, right? However, you're going to find that essentially no one gets out of line to take advantage of you by check raising the river specifically, because it's really, really costly when it fails, right? Usually when they're check raising you on the river, it costs 20, 30, 50, all in, a lot of big blinds, right? And because it takes so many big blinds, they just aren't going to do it. I can pretty much guarantee you Unless we are playing against the absolute best players in the world, they are not trying to exploit you by getting to the river and then check raising you frequently. Matthew asks, is it always the absolute nuts when they check raise the river? Or could it be close to, but not the actual nuts, like the effective nuts, right? Could it be just middle set? Sure, it could be just middle set. But if you're sitting there with like top pair, top kicker, say you have ace king and it comes whatever, king XXXX, and you just bet flop, bet turn, bet river, and then they check raise you, you should probably fold, right? Because you lose to all the two pairs. You lose to all the sets. Obviously, you should be a little bit more inclined to call when all the draws miss. But, again, most players are just not raising. They just check fold when they miss their draws. Let's take a look at a hand that will illustrate this point. Here we have pocket eights. We raise pre-flop. We're playing 1-2 no limit. And the big blind calls. This is a standard player in small stakes games. He checks flop. We're going to make a small bet here with most of our range. We do bet $5, which is great. And opponent calls. You may say, why bet $5? Why not bet gigantic to try to price our opponent out? Well, because then we force our opponent to play well, right? If you bet big and your opponent folds out all their garbage, that's not a good result for you, right? Very rarely should your goal be to just make your opponent fold out all the hands that you beat, right? You want to keep your opponent in with junk. What a lot of players do wrong here is the opponent will check the flop. They'll bet 13 or 15 or 20 or whatever. And then when their opponent calls, their opponent has literally a king or a good flush draw every time. You want to be against a king or a good flush draw? No, because you lose to all of those hands for the most part, right? I mean, you beat the draws, but barely. So instead, bet small, keep your opponent with ace high, a 6, a 4. And that's going to work out way better for you in the long run. So we bet small, opponent calls, turns a 3, opponent checks. Now, this is a nice spot to check behind. We could continue betting small if we felt inclined, but I think you're going to find that most small stakes players will call a flop bet, then just fold out all their junky stuff on the turn, and then continue mostly with good draws and a king, which again is not really what we want. This is, again, a scenario where a lot of people make the big mistake of just betting big to try to make sure they don't get outdrawn. But realize, for the most part, when you bet small on the flop, your opponent's range is going to be pretty wide. And if the range is pretty wide, you don't really have to worry about getting outdrawn all that often. They're going to have a whole lot of 6s and 4s that have 5 outs. Let them draw to their 5 outs. It's okay. Especially if they'll pay off a river bet. So check, check. River's a 9. Opponent checks. And now, this is an excellent spot to value bet thinly that I bet most of you here do not ever take. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, if I bet here, they're going to fold out all of their junk. But no, they're going to call you with a 6 and they're going to call you with a 4 sometimes. You may say, couldn't they just have a 9? Well, not really, right? I mean, what 9s make logical sense? The flush draws with a 9. That may be ace 9, which sure they could have. King 9, but king would probably at least consider playing the hand differently, like by betting the river, right? Queen 9, sure. Jack 9, sure. 10-9, sure. 9-8, we block that, right? So you see that there really aren't a ton of those. It's like 5 combinations of 9s that make logical sense. Maybe the opponent could have a backdoor flush draw, like ace 9 of hearts. I mean, then again, you're talking about another 5 or 6 combinations of hands. But really, it's not all that many. And the nice thing about this scenario here is that a lot of people bet with all of their kings on the river. Just think about your games, right? They check, call the flop with a king, check, check on the turn. They value bet with a king on the river every single time. So, in this scenario, when they check the river, they probably don't have a king. So if the opponent doesn't have a king, and they probably don't have 2 pair because they would have bet that too, that means they have a hand worse than a king. So of the hands they could have that are worse than a king, what are the most likely hands that are worse than a king? Right? Well, it's going to be mostly a 6 or a 4. So if our opponent has a whole lot of 6s and 4s, how much will they call with a 6 and a 4? Take a second to think about it. Are we assuming our opponent's a calling station? No, we're not assuming our opponent's a calling station. We're assuming our opponent is a standard recreational player in small stakes games. So in this scenario, the opponent's going to call a relatively small to medium bet. In this scenario, these hands were played by my student, by the way. He bet 15. I think this is probably a touch big. I think something like 12 or 10 is probably better. I think that's really going to ensure you get called like pretty much every time. Bet sizing is always a tough thing in live poker, especially because like sometimes you can just tell your opponent's calling. And if you can just tell your opponent's calling because they put you on a bluff, well, then you might as well just bet bigger, right? But I think in general, a bet of about $10 on the river is pretty nice. My student did go for 15. See if he gets called. He does. And he was against 7-6, so nice, right? And I think you're probably going to get called a decent amount more often when you bet smaller, but like this is just perfectly fine. I have no problem with this bet size. I think it's certainly fine and reasonable. How often are we allowing our opponents to chase trips or two pair here? Well, a whole lot. When I bet the turn, my opponent's mostly going to call with better hands, right? I mean, like pocket eights here is a very, very nice hand to check behind on the turn. And we say let them chase. I mean, the guy has 5 outs most of the time. So yeah, they can have their 5 outs, especially if they're going to pay me off on the river when we miss. Did we miss value by checking the turn? Well, in theory against this exact hand, maybe, but he's not going to call a turn and a river bet most of the time. He's going to call one of the two. And the nice thing about checking behind on the turn is that we just lose way less against a king, and we make it impossible to get check raised, which is great, right? We do not want to get bluffed off our hand. You're going to find that realizing your equity is a vital skill in poker. And that often implies checking behind with your marginal made hands. I mean, we discuss this extensively at pokercoaching.com and in my cash game masterclass, where your marginal made hands essentially always, or almost always, want to check behind on the turn. So a marginal made hand in this scenario is going to be a bad king, a 6, a middle pair, something like that. So this is a situation where it's very, very nice to just check behind. Hope you all can't hear my kid yelling. I asked Grandpa to have the kids to bed early, but he didn't do it. All right, if you're value betting a certain size and raising, that when bluffing to give bad odds, will they not pick up on that? So I guess you're saying, will they pick up on the fact that we're value betting a specific size small to try to get our opponent to call? I mean, maybe, but also realize that we're playing small stakes games where people are making egregious errors on a regular basis. We are supposed to be maximally exploiting our opponents. So anyway, this is a scenario where value betting makes a whole lot of sense, and I think a lot of people do not value bet here. And you're thinking, oh, this only works against a calling station, but no, it does not. It works against almost every player in the small stakes games if you bet a reasonable amount on the river. Clearly don't bet like 25 on the river, because then they're going to fold every time. Say we hold kings and the board reads king, 9, 8, 5, 2, and our opponent check raises us. Should we fold because he could have 7, 6, or do we call hoping he has 9s, 8s, or 5s? Look, I usually call with kings in that spot because they could have 9s, 8s, or 5s. Some people check raise like king 8 there. So I'm not folding like second nuts every single time, but it depends on the board run out, right? Like in this scenario, if I'm betting and the guy raises me on the river, what am I calling with? I'm not going to fold top set, that's for sure. I mean, sure, we lose to 7, 5, and 5, 2. But I mean, a lot of people are going to sit here and think king 9 is great or 9, 6 is great, right? And there are some busted flush draws they could conceivably turn into a bluff. Not a lot of them, and I don't expect it to happen very often, but there are some. So anyway, that's exploit number 1. Value bet thinly on the river, especially whenever some draws miss, especially when your opponent may be a bit of a calling station, especially when the board doesn't change all that much. Next, over-bluff on dynamic boards, okay? Small stakes players do not like to call down large bets across multiple streets with bluff catchers. This allows you to apply a lot of aggression on boards that are likely to change on the future betting rounds. That is a dynamic board. A dynamic board is one that is going to change a lot on future betting rounds. For example, on 8-5-3, well, if you have a hand like 9-8 here, the board's going to run out pretty bad for that, right? Just because it's going to be a lot of overcards or straight cards, right? What about on 10-4-2? I mean, it's also going to run out pretty nasty. So let's take a look at an example of that. Here we have Queen Jack of Clubs, which is a great hand. We raise to $6. Big blind calls. Flop comes 8-5-3. Opponent checks. This is a board where we should be betting very frequently, perhaps with 100% of our range or close enough to it. And we should especially be betting with hands that lack showdown value, but can very easily pick up additional equity on the turn. So what does that mean? That means our hands like, well, Queen Jack of Clubs is a beautiful example of a hand that you want to be betting in this scenario. Because if the turn is an ace or a king, that's a scare card. If the turn is a queen or a jack, we make top pair. If it's a 10 or a 9, we make a straight draw. If the turn's a club, we make a draw, right? So this is a scenario where we get to be betting very frequently. What does R mean after the 8-5-3? It means rainbow. It means not containing a flush draw. Like this is 8-5-3 rainbow. So here, opponent checks, we're going to be betting frequently. I think I'd probably go a tiny bit smaller. in this scenario, just because it's very, very hard for the opponent to have anything great on this board. So I think this is nice. Warlock says this is a good spot to check raise very frequently if the opponent's continuation betting too often. Yeah, sure. That said, if you make small bets, you get to stick around against check raises with all sorts of hands. Like say we're playing against a competent opponent. Again, we're assuming we're playing against small stakes recreational player here. If we're playing against a competent opponent, this is a fine spot to bet the flop and then not fold to a check raise. Because they're going to be check raising with all sorts of stuff, and we pick up lots of equity. Also, we're never folding any pair. We're calling a lot is what it amounts to, depending on the size, of course. So again, we're not discussing here how to play against fundamentally sound opponents. We're discussing how to play against the average player in small stakes games. And now realize there are various player types, right? People make all sorts of different mistakes, but in general, the player pool does do a few things wrong. And right here is a good example of a spot where most people will call the flop with all sorts of pairs, but then they will fold out those pairs by the river. Doesn't this board smash their range? Not at all. Think about their range and compare it to our range. The problem is that they're going to have is that they don't have aces, kings, queens, jacks in their range, right? We have all the sets. We both have all the sets, so that's break even. They maybe have 8-5 for two pair. They probably don't have 8-3, right? So, we both have ace-8. We both have king-8 suited. Maybe they have more king-8 offsuits. They have a lot more marginal hands than we do, but they certainly don't have a nut advantage here. And a lot of people think that, oh, this board hits the opponent well, but really it doesn't. It'd be different if the board was like 8-6-5 or 8-7-5. Then, yes, it does connect with them way better. But the fact that there are no immediate nut hands for the opponent to have that we cannot have means that whoever had the range advantage pre-flop still has the range advantage. And in this scenario, we have 8s and 5s in our range, right? So the opponent doesn't have a nut advantage either. When they don't have the range advantage and they don't have the nut advantage, they should be checking a lot and not really check raising very often either, just because they can't have anything, right? When they check raise here, they need to be check raising 9-8 to justify check raising all the draws as well, and this is just not going to work out for them so well. All right. That said, if people continuation bet too often and then fold out queen jack of clubs and fold out pocket sevens and fold out ace-5, then sure, check raise them to death, right? All right, so anyway, we bet, opponent calls, turn is a king, which gives us no draw. But take a second to think about the opponent's range. Does this king hit them very well at all? Well, the answer is just no, right? Unless they had king-8, king-5, or king-3, they probably did not improve here because they don't have ace-king, because they usually would 3-bet that pre-flop. Obviously, everyone doesn't, right? But in this scenario, this hits us way better than it hits them because now our ace-king, king-queen, king-jack, king-10, king-9, all of those improve to a decently strong hand. And here, if I did have a hand like pocket 9s, I would keep value betting. Usually with a small size because we are trying to get called by all sorts of 8s, 5s, 3s, or junky draws, right? So this is a spot where we definitely want to keep bluffing with a lot of our hands that cannot win at showdown, which at this point, queen high probably isn't going to win at showdown. Obviously, if our opponent will check call with, or check with a draw, like 6-4, and then just check that on the river, then maybe we don't necessarily need to bluff this. But I think most people at this point in time realize if it goes check on the turn and they have 6-4 for just the nut low in their hand or close enough to nut low, they should be bluffing that on the river, in which case we're going to fold and lose the pot. So this is a scenario where I think we just want to keep betting. And we want to start to use a medium-ish size with our nut hands, like a king or better. You typically want to be betting kind of big. Now, we can discuss splitting our bluff sizing between having small bluffs and big bluffs. Usually, you're going to want to use a small sizing with your best bluffs that have a decent amount of equity, like perhaps ace-2, something like that. And then you're going to use your worst bluffs for your big bet size, like 9-7 suited, right? That's a hand that would definitely want to be betting big here. Queen Jack's kind of in the middle to where the point where you can do whatever you'd like. In small stakes games, or whenever I'm trying to maximally exploit our opponents in general, especially a specific tendency, like I think they're going to fold too often to a turn plus river bet, I usually just don't have a small bluff size, right? This is a big exploit, and if your opponents know that, then they can play way better against you, but they're not going to figure that out, right? I'm telling them all here, and they're still not going to figure it out because they're not watching this. Only you all here are watching this. So in this scenario, my small bet size is going to be almost entirely for value, and my bigger bet size is going to contain, call it too many bluffs. But again, people aren't getting to the turn and looking to check raise you in a spot where Like, this king just smashes my range. I just told you here, right? Like, yeah, I'm bluffing too often, but my betting range is going to be very strong. It's going to be sets, 2 pairs, and a king. So do you really want to be check raising into a range that contains, I don't know, 35% of that? I mean, the answer is yes, because I'm going to fold too often. But a lot of people are afraid of that. They're not going to do it. You assume we're planning to triple barrel. Oh, yes, this is definitely a triple barrel spot because what I just say, right? The opponent has a whole lot of 8s, 5s, and 3s. If the opponent has a whole lot of 8s, 5s, and 3s, are they really going to call the turn and then call the river with a lot of 8s, 5s, and 3s? So the answer is no, right? They're not going to call a reasonably sized bet with 8s, 5s, or 3s. So opponent checks, we bet, they fold and we win. And again, nice pickup from my student here who followed my strategy to a T. Maybe he could have used slightly smaller bet sizes on the flop and turn, but like whatever, this is fine. I have no problem with this hand. When should we fold in this strategy? Well, fold when they raise you, right? If they check raise you at any point in this hand against the generic player at 1-2, you fold. Easy, 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 easy fold if they check raise you at any point. Because you don't have anything. We are bluffing. If, say, like the turn was the 10 of clubs, they check and we bet and they raise, we can't fold then because we have gut shot to the nuts and flush draw. So there we're just kind of on the hook to call and try to get there on the river. But if the turn's a king and we bet, obviously we fold because we beat almost nothing. So that's exploit number 2, over-bluff on dynamic boards. And if we are bluffing the flop and the turn here, we're probably bluffing a little bit too often, and that's okay because people fold too often. If people fold too often, your adjustment should be to bluff too often. It is worth mentioning, by the way, that from a GTO point of view, opponent needs to call the turn and river with some 8s. Let's go back to this. So in this scenario, is the opponent actually going to call the turn and the river with an 8? They're just not, right? They actually need to defend with some 5s and 3s. You think they're check calling down with 4-3 or ace-3 or ace-5 or 6-5 or pocket 6s? It's like, no, right? People just don't defend often enough here. It's tough to. So whenever you're betting the turn here, you can just bluff them out of their seats. What do we do against the calling station there? Well, depends on how wide they're going to call off, right? Or if they're going to check call down with any 5, well then obviously don't bluff as often and just value bet them thinly, right? Would you be more apt to fold if it's multi-way? How would you have played this different multi-way? I mean, it'd be a very different hand. We're not discussing how do we extrapolate this to many, many situations today. I have a multi-way section in my cash game masterclass at pokercoaching.com/cash, I think. pokercoaching.com/cash game. All right. So anyway, definitely check that out if you are interested in very specific scenarios or different scenarios, because in that it's like a 29-part class, right? I go through many topics, and multi-way is definitely there because I recognize in small stakes games you play a whole lot of multi-way pots. That said, in this hand, let's go back to the beginning. Say I raise button calls, big blind calls. If I bet the flop, I'm still going to bet the flop here even if the button's in this hand because same reason, the board's dynamic and it's going to change a lot, and I have a hand that cannot win at showdown but can pick up a whole lot of draws. So I would bet the flop, button would fold, big blind would call, and we'd play out the hand exactly the same way. So in that scenario, nothing would change. If it was 4 or 5, 6 ways, maybe I stop bluffing. As there are more people in the pot, you want to play more straightforwardly. Even then, Queen Jack of clubs is a pretty nice bluffing hand. If I had like Jack 10 of clubs, I would definitely bluff there, even like 4 or 5 ways, because that's just going to pick up better and more cards on the turn to keep bluffing with. All right, exploit number 3. Call wider than normal when you are essentially guaranteed to play in position. So small stakes players have a few leaks that allow for this to be profitable. Doesn't like the word post-flop for some reason. Post-flop is a real word. PowerPoint. So first thing that people do to allow you to call a little bit wider is they do not squeeze often enough from the blinds. When it goes raise, call, they just are not 3-betting from the blinds often at all. They just don't do it. So that's going to allow you to call a little bit wider from the button especially, and maybe even from the cutoff, especially if you can play in live poker and just like tell the player on the button's folding, which happens a lot. Or if you're playing online and you have stats or you've been paying attention that the player on the button is a tight player who just doesn't defend often enough. Next, players overplay. Essentially, they make it to where when they do re-raise, I typed this wrong, sorry. They tend to have just really, really good hands when they do re-raise pre-flop, which is nice. And next, if you look closely, you can often tell if the player on the button or the cutoff are done with their hand, and that's going to allow you to call a little bit wider. All right, so in this scenario, my student said the player on the button was like clearly folding their hand, okay? So knowing that, and I guess you should say, how do you know if the player on the button is clearly folding their hand? Well, if you're playing live poker, if they look at their cards, some people make the mistake of using a card protector, and they'll put their card protector on a different part of their card if they're going to play the hand, and they'll put it somewhere else or on a different part of their cards if they are not going to play the hand. For example, I played with a guy just the other day in it was a $10,000 buy-in tournament in the Bahamas. He was obviously a recreational player, and he would put his card protector like sort of on the front of his cards. He would set his cards like a rectangle with the short sides on the top and the bottom. He always set his cards like that after looking at them. And then he'd put his card protector squarely in the middle, like right in the middle of the cards if he was going to play it, and then a little bit higher when he's not going to play it. You may say, how can you possibly notice something like that? Well, you train yourself as a professional poker player to look for common things people really do wrong. And when people use card protectors, they just don't use them consistently every time. They just don't do it. And to be fair, like people if they look at their cards, very often they will do something differently if they know they're going to play the hand or if they know if they have a strong hand versus a marginal hand, etc. But something like a card protector is just a really, really clear thing that you can look at every single time they play a hand, as opposed to trying to figure out if they hold their hands differently or they breathe slightly differently or they blink slightly differently, right? There's like a lot of things to look at. But one thing I found to be really consistent across the board is that when people use a card protector, they do not use it the same every time. So anyway, like I just got to play the cutoff a lot. The guy was on my direct left, kind of like this scenario actually. He was on my direct left, and I just got to play way more hands on the button, or in the cutoff, because it was almost like I was on the button because it was clear to me when that player was going to stick around. So in this scenario, my student says the player on the button is obviously folding. I mean, some people will have the cards almost in the muck, or they'll turn and start watching the TV or whatever, right? There's a whole pile of things that they can do. Okay, you may say, well, why would you want to look at your cards early? Why not just wait your turn? Well, the problem with waiting your turn is that then everybody gets to look at your cards. Do you want that? You really want to have everyone at the table look at you while you look at your cards? And the answer is obviously not, right? So in the ideal world, you look at your cards when no one is looking at you, and then don't give off any reads, right? So that's kind of the optimal way to go about doing this. A lot of people think, oh, just wait till it's your turn, but it's actually not the answer. The answer is don't have obvious tells. And the thing is that a lot of recreational players just either don't care or they are oblivious to the fact that they have obvious tells. And I mean, I see even like this happens with strong players a lot. They'll just do something slightly differently. Some of them like kind of get a little bit rigid when they're going to play the hand, or they start paying attention a little bit more, or they start breathing a little bit differently. I mean, they don't make the mistakes of using the card protector to, they don't put the card protector on a different part of their cards or slam it on it or anything like that. So, anyway, this is a scenario where you can definitely play a little bit wider in the cutoff, or maybe even the hijack seat, right? If you can tell the players yet to act are definitely done with their hand. So anyway, in this spot, student can 3-bet or call or fold. Either plays, or any of those plays are fine. Decides to call though because he knew the player on the button was folding. 3 ways, flops the nuts for the hero. That's good. Under the gun, +1 now bets $15 into the $19 pot. Here's another general read in these scenarios. When people bet kind of big into multiple people, they usually just have a pretty good hand. Usually these players will bet smaller with their marginal hands, bigger with their nut hands. And when I say a nut hand here, what is a nut hand? What is a hand that under the gun +1 will think is very, very good? Like worthy of putting in a big bet. Take a second and think about it. It's probably going to be something like king, jack, or better, right? Like a pretty good king or better. So if it's going to be a pretty good king or better, will they fold a pretty good king or better? And the answer is obviously not, right? Next, you want to ask how many 8s are in the opponent's range? Well, not a whole lot, right? They could have ace 8 of diamonds, maybe 9-8 of diamonds, which we beat, 8-7 of diamonds, which we beat. So we're really not worried about the 8 so often. So in this scenario, we're losing to pocket kings, so there's 3 pocket kings and 1 ace-8 suited, right? So that's 4 combinations of hands. How many ace kings are there? There's 3 kings left and 4 aces left. 3 times 4 is 12. So they have 12 combinations of ace king, 12 combinations of king queen, Maybe they don't have all the king jacks. Let's say they have 3 combinations of king jack suited. So that is, 27 decent kings. Obviously, they could have king 10, king 9, etc. But so that's 27 combinations of decent kings compared to 4 combinations of hands that we lose to. So obviously, we're thrilled to get money in this pot, right? Paul says, don't forget about pocket aces. Indeed, don't forget about pocket aces. 6 pocket aces. Don't forget those. So we beat 27, 33 combinations of hands, right? So like this is just a scenario where we are thrilled. We are putting our money in the pot. And even if we had like 8-7, we are still thrilled. We aren't losing to all the 8x hands. Well, yeah, I only counted 4 ace-x hands that we lose to. Ace 8 of diamonds, and that's it, right? Because most players are not opening from under the gun with king 8 suited, queen 8 suited, jack 8 suited. Maybe like, maybe not even 10-8 suited. It's like 9-8 suited and 8-7 suited, right? Could he be betting queens? Sure, but like if we raise here and he has queens, he's probably just going to fold. What I'm trying to say here, though, is this is a scenario where we can very confidently raise and put money in this pot, right? Some people get in their minds, oh my God, I could be beat by pocket king, so I'm just going to call and see what happens. But no. That's a big mistake. Also, when you raise the turn and the river, even players who are not paying a whole lot of attention will start to get really nitty. And what I mean by that is like, say he does have even like ace king on the turn. If he bets the flop big, and I call, he bets the turn big, and then I raise him, a lot of players will just start folding out hands like ace king. And to be fair, they probably should against the average player in small stakes games, because what is the opponent really raising with? I mean, they're pretty much just always raising with an 8. Why should we raise here and make it to where the big blind can't call very often? Because we want to get all of our money in against under the gun +1. I don't care about getting another $15 in against the big blind, because what's the big blind going to call with, right? Think about this. Under the gun +1 bets $15 and then cut off calls. You think big blind's going to call here with like ace 9 offsuit or pocket 6s or pocket 9s? Like, no, they're going to fold. So the big blind is like not my concern at all here. My main concern is how do I get all my money in against under the gun +1, who almost certainly has something decent. So if under the gun almost certainly has something decent, I want to raise immediately before the board gets worse. Like say he has king queen and we raise and then he like an ace comes on the turn or anything really. I mean, it's going to be a pretty bad spot for him. So we want to just get money in before the board gets a little bit nasty. So anyway, I raise here, under the gun +1 calls. I say it's my student. I would have played the hand the same way so far. So that's good. Under the gun +1 checks. And now we definitely want to bet again. So now the goal is again to figure out how do we get all of the money in the pot by the river. And so the pot's $110. I think I would have gone more like 45 here, because I don't think anyone's folding a king to 45. And that's going to set up $100 in the pot going... $200 in the pot with $100 behind going to the river. My student did a little bit smaller. He bet 35. I think this is probably leaving a little bit of money on the table. And also, one side effect of this perhaps is that if you bet 35 on the turn now, your opponent's getting slightly worse odds, or slightly better. What am I saying? Slightly worse odds to call on the river, which will result in him folding some portion of the time. So I think I'd prefer a slightly bigger raise. Here, though, the opponent went all in, which is great and fine. Again, we lose to almost nothing here, right? Think about it. We raise the flop. An opponent called. Opponent has either ace 8. I mean, maybe queen 8, jack 8, 10 8. Notice he can't have king 8 of diamonds because the king of diamonds is on the board. So in this scenario, if the opponent's going to always raise, let's say, pocket aces and ace king, which is not a good play, but some people will, that's 12 ace kings plus 6 aces. So 18 combinations of hands, right? Compared to how many 8s are there in our opponent's range? There's 1 ace 8. Let's even say 1 queen 8, 1 jack 8, 3 pocket kings. So that's a 6 combination of hands. So we beat 18 and we lose to 6. Now, they may not always raise aces or ace king. So let's discount those by half. Let's say they only raise aces and ace king half the time. So instead of 18, it's only 9, right? So now we have 9 hands we beat and 6 hands we lose to. Still an easy call, right? In this scenario, we need to be good. Well, we have to put in 120 to win a pot that's going to be 400. So we need to be good, about a third of the time, roughly? Something like that. So in this scenario, Like these numbers could be even flip-flopped to where I'm only going to be good six times out of 15. But it's still just an easy call. So easy call here against most players. This is a spot, by the way, that kind of differs from where I said earlier where people only raise with the effective nuts. A lot of people in this spot will think aces are the effective nuts, even though they're obviously not, because I could have an 8. Anyway, we call off clearly. Opponent has ace-king for a horribly overplayed hand, which is great. You could see raising the flop is an exploit. Well, we're raising the flop because our opponent's just not going to fold, right? Especially when they make that big flop bet. And again, going back to the flop, I don't really care about keeping the big blind in because the big blind's not going to call a $15 bet without something pretty good anyway. And if he does have like king jack, and he's going to fold, but that's fine because I already know under the gun +1 has a good hand. The thing is like when you are playing in these scenarios, especially multi-way, when you bet the flop and call, the players you get to act are really going to tighten up because under the gun +1 clearly has something, and I clearly have something. Taylor says there are no draws on this flop. That means we can't have a raising range. That is not true. I see a bunch of obvious draws. We have 10-9 of clubs, 9-7 of clubs, of hearts, of diamonds, right? Whenever you're on a very dry board like this, the draws become backdoor draws. And there's always backdoor draws. And if you're saying there are no draws in this scenario, it means that you are never raising with your nut hands. But you really want to raise with your nut hands. I mean, this is a good reason for that, right? Like, under the gun +1 has something. So you want to be able to raise with nut hands. And if you're trying to be balanced, then sure, raise with some bluffs. But if I was playing this hand, and under the gun +1 bets 15, I'm just folding 10-9 of clubs because he clearly has something, right? So the fact that he clearly has something means I should not raise with any bluffs. How should the villain have played this? Villain should have not blasted the flop. Villain should have bet like $6 on the flop, right? If you bet $6 on the flop, now maybe I am going to be way less inclined to raise because now his range is a whole lot wider, right? So opponent messed up straight from the flop bet size. He certainly shouldn't have raised the turn either. If he bets the flop and I still raise, he should probably call flop, call turn, and then probably call off on the river, but it's pretty rough, depending on what he thinks about me, clearly. Let's see. You always just call on the flop to get protection from the other plays and to get money in the pot. Well, you don't get money in the pot by calling. You get money in the pot by raising. You want to play big pots with your best hands. So the population will mostly raise with very strong hands, but will still call raises with marginal hands. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Whenever people make the aggressive actions, it's usually with just very strong hands. Whenever they take the passive actions, it's usually with like marginal hands. All right, so those are the 3 big exploits to use in small stakes games that will immediately increase your profit. Let's just review them. Number 1 is to value bet thinly on the river whenever your opponent has not shown any sort of immense aggression, right? Next, over-bluff on dynamic boards because you're going to usually have good turn and river barreling opportunities. And third, call wider than normal when you're essentially guaranteed to be in position. Position is powerful, and it will allow you to absolutely crush your opponents. So now, one more thing I wanted to tell you about today is my Black Friday sale. We've done a few Black Friday sales in the past, and this year we are absolutely going all out. So, we have over 30 poker courses by myself and other world-class poker professionals that are going to be on sale for Black Friday. I'm actually opening this for you all right now. If you go to pokercoaching.com/Black Friday, you can see everything we have to offer. Let me tell you about a few of these things that we have available for you. First is my Cash Game Masterclass. I mentioned that earlier. There are 29 lessons. These are 10 to 30 minute long videos where I go through every aspect of cash games. And I cover strategies that will help you to crush cash games all the way up to like 5-10 live and something like, 1-2 online. So this will make you a very solid winner. I have many students who have gone from playing 1-2 no limit as break-even players to 5-10 grinders winning $100 an hour. And that's over the course of like 3 or 6 months. And it's just because they are willing to sit down, study my material, and then implement it. So in this course, I give you in-depth strategy and a load of examples on how to think about ranges and how to develop a fundamentally sound strategy. And then how to adjust to take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. Kind of like what we did here to some extent. If you are a Poker Coaching Premium member, by the way, you get access to the Cash Game Masterclass as well as 62 other courses, just so you know. Again, you can check that out at pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Also, we have available my 25K Platinum Coaching Session where I coached my student, Nicole Segel, to help him prepare for the $25,000 buy-in PokerStars Players Championship in the Bahamas. Nicole is a guy from India. He had liked my poker content. We worked a little bit in the past. And PokerStars was giving away a bunch of $25,000 buy-in seats to players who did random things. And he got his 25K seat by getting in shape. He was in bad shape. He smoked a bunch of cigarettes, and he got off all of that, got in great shape. He's maintaining it, and now he streams a lot on Twitch. And what we did is, since he was in India, we're on the other sides of the world, we had a hard time having private sessions. What happened is he would play online, send me the hand history, I would review it the next day, and send it back to him. He'd watch it, play again, send me the next hand history. We did this back and forth 15 times. And when we first started, he was not very good, to be polite. But after going through the 15 hand histories, he got significantly better, and he actually won a tournament in the process. I think it was for a few $1,000 playing, small stakes games online. And then he went out to the Bahamas. He chipped up from 1 starting stack to 3 starting stacks with no real significant showdowns on day 1. Eventually got it all in for a flip for about $150,000 in equity and could not win the flip. So he didn't win the tournament, but he got a lot of experience, got way better. And this type of back and forth is a great way to improve your skills. And all of these 15 back and forth sessions, I recorded. That was part of the deal. I didn't charge him anything. I said, just let me record the sessions and we'll see if you improve, right? And he did. And then he let me use those as a course for all of you. So that is also part of Black Friday. Initial price we sold it for is $199, but only $25 today. We're basically giving it away. Next, World Series prep sessions. Another one of my students, Blas Zerzow. We did this exact same back and forth. I don't know where he is now. He was in Slovenia, and he ended up winning $1.3 million on Party Poker from a $5 initial satellite. It's a pretty good spin up, right? And then in preparation for the World Series of Poker, we did a bunch of back and forths as well, kind of like I did with Nickel. And he went out to the World Series. He then went out to, don't know what it was called, some big tournament in Germany, some big tournament in Austria, and he's had pretty good success since then. And I like him. He's a good, smart, young guy. His head's on straight. He's not just like loading his money up and blasting it all into tournaments. He set aside about $1 million of it for, he finished college first. Then he paid off. He bought a house for him and his mom. Then he set aside the rest of it in a like index fund account. So he's just going to print money for the rest of his life. Then he's going to take about $300K to play poker tournaments. He's not just buying into 10Ks immediately. And he's going to take it slow, which is smart. He's not giving his money away. He's either going to slowly run it up as a professional poker player, or if it doesn't go well, he's going to retire and have $1 million in the bank. It's not such a bad idea. Paul said he bought this in February and won a tournament for 6,600 pounds shortly after. Well, good. All right, next, we have my Excelling at No Limit Hold'em webinars. These are 14 webinars I did with some of the brightest poker minds, including Phil Hellmuth, Dr. Tricia Gardner, Mike Sexton, Alex Fitzgerald, Elliot Rowe, who is the mindset expert for basically every super high-stakes poker player, Olivier Bousquet, one of the absolute best heads-up players in the world and WPT champion, and many, many more. We're giving these away for only $15 each. Don't know why we made all these so cheap. Well, I guess it's Black Friday, so you might as well get your hands on them. But these are all great. I wrote Excelling at No Limit Hold'em because I have the experience of getting to talk with all these players on a regular basis. Like, we'll just go out to lunch and go out to dinner and talk in a taxi cab or whatever. And I realized that most players never have that opportunity. So I wanted to be able to give that to all of you. So I wrote Excelling at No Limit Hold'em. It is my best-selling poker book. It's a big book. It's about 500 pages. And a lot has come from that. I mean, pokercoaching.com, my website, came after that. And we ended up working with Alex Fitzgerald, Matt Affleck. Alex Fitzgerald's written 2 books since then, introduced him to the publishers, and that happened. Mike Sexton got introduced to the publishers. Phil Hellmuth got introduced to the publishers. They have books. And a lot actually came from that, and that was fantastic. So anyway, all of those webinars are available, $15 each at pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Next, my website, pokercoaching.com. We are offering 1, 2, or 3 years access at heavily, heavily discounted prices. Normally, it's $468 for a year, or $1,404 for 3 years if you pay monthly. But for Black Friday, we're giving 1 year for $99, 2 years for $199, which is normally the price that we sell 1 year for. So it's kind of like buy 1 year, get one free when we're running a great promotion. And then 3 years for $299. And I am very, very proud of this course. I made pokercoaching.com to be what I wanted to have as a poker player starting to progress up through the games. So what did I want? I wish I had a good professional poker player, or better yet, a few good professional poker players going through my hands and reviewing my content. So how can I do this for a lot of people at the same time? Well, I made a bunch of quizzes where it's like you are playing in the game. I get set up the situation, tell you about the opponents, and then we go through the hand, kind of like we did in the 3 hands earlier today. And then at each decision point, you have to stop and think and make your decision. Remember how I was asking you to stop and think and make your decisions earlier, right? That's kind of how we do with the quizzes. And there are over 650 of them by myself and lots of other poker coaches. We also have over 20 video classes, which are, well, kind of like the first 30 minutes of this presentation, where we discuss a specific topic or go through a few adjustments you can make to beat your opponents. We also have over 40 challenge webinars where I ask you how to play your whole range pre-flop, on the flop, on the turn, and on the river, which essentially forces you to think like the world-class poker players do. And then we also have 30 coaching webinars with myself and the other coaches at pokercoaching.com, where we go through all sorts of ideas. Also, if you're a Poker Coaching member, we have a private Discord chat. And also, we have been backing some of the members into live poker tournaments because, you know, why not? I want to get back to the members who support me, so I'm happy to put them in tournaments. So far, we've had 2 players cash for about, $2,500 total, something like that, which is about what we've put in so far, and we'll just keep doing that. By the way, here are all the coaches at pokercoaching.com. We have myself, Matt Affleck. Y'all may remember him from the World Series of Poker deep runs he's had. Alex Fitzgerald, who has perhaps coached more people than me. Maybe the only poker coach who has coached more people than Jonathan Little has. He's worked with many, many backing stables for years and years and years, doing extensive database analysis. He's a he's been around a long time and he knows a lot about poker. Here we have Evan Jarvis, who is great at crushing the small and medium stakes games. And then a few coaches we brought on recently. We have Jonathan Jaffe, who actually beat Heads Up one time for $1.5 million. Actually, this was $750K. It was okay. We stayed friends. He recovered. He won a World Poker Tour shortly after it. And he was my selfish hire. I hired him because I want him to teach me. So here's my coach. He is perhaps the best exploitative poker player in the world, in my opinion. Next, we have Michael Acevedo. We just released a book with D&B Poker called Modern Poker Theory. And I was tasked with making the best GTO book I possibly could. And I knew exactly who to go to. Michael Acevedo is the man. Every time he plays, he just absolutely crushes online. But he loves studying the game and learning to beat the game. And he basically has the whole game solved. It's taken him about 4 or 5 years using supercomputers, multiple of them. I think he has 8 supercomputer servers. They cost him tons of money to rent. And anyway, he solved poker. And he's going to be explaining how to play fundamentally sound. So here I have like one of the best exploitative players in the world. Right next to him, one of the best GTO players in the world. And to be fair, both of them are just world-class poker players together, and they crush it. Next, we have Lexi Gavin. I just hired her. She is a fantastic live cash game pro. I mean, to be fair, she's played a ton online as well. And she is absolutely demolishing the live cash games at the moment. She also runs the charity series of poker, which I love. They do great work. And I'm happy to support good people and, get them out in front of you. And next we have Tristan Wade. Tristan just came on, and Tristan and Matt Affleck both do webinars where they review your hand histories. Every month you can submit hand histories, and then we have webinars with them. So that was what you get for poker coaching, but we also, for the first time ever, are going to have Poker Coaching Premium annual memberships. I initially made poker coaching and thought it was loads and loads of content, but then I had a small section of the players who are trying their best to be high stakes professional poker players who are devoting a lot of time to the game to try to become the absolute best players they can be. Because initially, the content on poker coaching was, high level from myself, but at the same time, I can only make so much content. I make plenty, but I can only make so much. And that's why we hired, for example, Jonathan Jaffe and Alex Fitzgerald. Alex Fitzgerald was here for a long time. Michael Acevedo and Matt Affleck. I brought him on to do more game theory optimal stuff and to review the students' hand histories. And anyway, over the next year, for Poker Coaching Premium members, we're going to be adding 300 additional new hand quizzes, 24 more video classes, 12 live challenge webinars, and 48 coaching webinars on top of all of the content we already have. So you may say, what's the difference between Poker Coaching and Poker Coaching Premium? Well, you see, a big difference here are the video classes, right? We have over 110 in-depth video classes and a whole lot more live webinars. It's actually crazy. I was looking at the webinar schedule just the other day, and we have something like 4 live webinars with world-class professionals for the Poker Coaching Premium members every week. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. We're not guaranteeing that. I don't know if I can keep up that rate, but we are guaranteeing, I think it was like 4 per month or something like that. It was pretty ridiculous. It's cool that I'm able to give all of you such content. So thanks for all that. Also included in Poker Coaching Premium is all of the classes I discussed earlier, as well as many, many more. There are 62 poker courses. Each of these is between 2 hours and 6 hours long. And it is fantastic. So all of that is available as part of Poker Coaching Premium, as long as you are a member. So normal price for Poker Coaching Premium is $1,188 per year. It's $99 per month normally. And look, I told my team I do not want to discount Poker Coaching Premium much, if at all, because really it's about the only thing we make money off of. And it's because it costs a lot of money to make all of this content. But for Black Friday, we will be letting you get a year-long membership for $599. So that is what we have to offer you for Black Friday. We have 30 courses available for between like $10 and $25 or $10 and $50. And then we have Poker Coaching yearly memberships, 2-year membership, and 3-year memberships, and also annual memberships for Poker Coaching Premium. Does the Cash Game Masterclass fit for live cash or online cash games, or both? Definitely both. I think a lot of people get in their minds that online and live poker are 2 very different things, but really, they're not all that different. The big difference is that players online play a whole lot better than the players live. Actually, just funny enough, I just went to the Bahamas, and in my spare time, I played between 25 cent, 50 cent, and $2, $5 online cash games on Party Poker because I wanted to add some additional content. Not exactly sure how we're going to put it on the site, but we're either going to make an individual course out of it because it is something like 4 hours long, or we're just going to add it to the Cash Game Masterclass. Either way, if you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, as soon as it's released, you will get access to it. So, because I realized that I went through a lot of hand examples in the Cash Game Masterclass, but some of you said it'd be great if we could see you playing online. And so I played online on Party Poker, crushed the games. It was a lot of fun, and it was great. I mean, there were quite a few spots where you can just like hand read against your opponents, and you just kind of like know to make light calls. When all the draws miss and they make a big bet, find the call button and you will do great. So that is what we have for Black Friday. We are giving you essentially my life's work at a highly discounted price because at the end of the day, I want to help all of you become the best poker player you can be because I know that's going to help you improve your life significantly. Someone was talking the other day about like, what is your mission? What are you trying to do in life? And what medium do you use to do it? And at the end of the day, I want all of you to be happier, healthier, wiser, and I want you to just enjoy your time that you have. And how do we do that? Well, my medium is getting you great at poker so that you can start winning life-changing money. I mean, imagine, like many of my students, if you go from making no money from poker to $100 an hour, if you're willing to put in a lot of time, like I did as a young poker player, that's, $1,000 a day, $365,000 a year. That's how much many of my students are making. It's how much I was making when I used to go to Bellagio every day. I would play 5, 10, or 10, 20 no limit every single day and make about $100 an hour. And I grind it hard because, if you're making $100 an hour as someone whose other alternatives are, well, go back to college or work a minimum wage job, it is certainly a better alternative. And many of my students are achieving that. And I'm excited. That makes me happy. And I know that I can replicate that success with other people who are dedicated. And I realize for some people, even $599 sounds like a lot of money. And if it is, start a little bit slower. Because we have many poker coaching members who are just studying even a little bit, and they're winning like $25 an hour at 1-2-0 limit, which is still pretty good money, right? Obviously, we have good tournament players too. It's usually harder to nail down a tournament win rate, but I mean, we see people like Blas winning $1.3 million. Clearly, he's not the typical poker player. Most of you are not going to turn $5 into $1.3 million, but you can still win significant money from tournaments too, as long as you're putting in decent volume. Getting sidetracked. Anyway, poker education is very, very inexpensive compared to what you actually get and your potential income. I mean, compare it to college, right? I mean, I ended up not finishing college, and it was free for me because I had a scholarship paid for by the state of Florida. And normally, I don't even know how much it would have cost. Let's say $30,000 a year. $30,000 a year to go get to work. You have to work 4 years at college to get a job where you may make, let's say, $50,000 a year. Here, for $599, you get access to all of the content you need to help you learn how to make $100 per hour or more. I mean, think of the value, right? Is a poker coaching membership good enough to get you to a solid 5-10 live cash game win rates? Yes, as long as you're willing to do the work. I mean, I think a lot of people think, I'm just going to buy this membership and then watch 1 hour every month. Like, no, I mean, look, if you want to actually get good at poker, you do have to put in the time studying and working. But I've consolidated all of my years of knowledge and also hired many of the best poker players and coaches in the world and consolidated all of their knowledge into concise classes, webinars, quizzes, challenges, etc., that will help you become great at poker quickly. And it's interesting, like the mindset people have pertaining to poker or to education in anything compared to like the education in college. I guess because you get a degree. Maybe I should start giving out degrees, huh? But anyway, $599 a year is a steal. I wish I had this whenever I was starting to come up in poker. To be fair, I spend loads of money on content each year, and for all of you, right? Because it's content I want, it's content I know that I need to continue progressing as a player, and I know it's content that my students need to continue progressing as a player. And I know that I have many, many students out there who are maximizing value and making the most out of it. So get in there and learn. Pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. I hope you enjoyed this. If you think this could help any of your friends, please share it with them. If you want to get the Black Friday sales, there will be links below this video later. So yeah, that's that. Anthony says, you honestly don't know how I can make a profit with these deals, LOL. Well, we'll make some. In the ideal world, we get 100,000 people paying me $699 or $599 a year, and then we'll be in okay shape. Can a losing player who's 40 years old become a winner with the membership? Well, Marcelo, if you work hard and study hard, yes. The question is, will you work hard and study hard? I have many students who are 60 years old, who are retired, who, didn't start with a ton of money when they retired. They retired, they had like $200K in their retirement account. They worked their whole lives to get $200K. And then, I think about one guy in particular right now, because he's told me his story and I've helped him a decent amount. He started studying with me and worked hard, and now he plays 2-5 no limit, makes $50 an hour. He's 60 years old, and he was a losing poker player before then, and he, like $200K gets a lot of money, but like, if you work your whole life and you end up with $200K when you're 60 or 65, however old he is, it's fine, but it's not amazing, right? And he was willing to devote time and effort and energy into studying at pokercoaching.com, and now he's winning $50 an hour. And he gets to do that whenever he wants, in his spare time, wherever he wants to live, and good for him. So is it possible? I know it's possible, but I also know that like poker is not a get-rich-quick scheme. I think a lot of people think, all right, I'm going to study poker for a month, and then I'm just going to go crush it and win $1 million. Like, no, you're not. Poker is a great way to get rich slowly, but a horrible way to try to gamble and get rich quick. So if you are willing to sit down, study, put in the effort, you will get there. But if you are not going to study and you're not going to work, then no, you probably won't get there. No, like I can put whatever, there is no magic bullet. I mean, if you look at most of the best poker players in the world, they all use pretty much the same strategy. They learn how to play fundamentally sound poker, And then they learn how to adjust to maximally exploit their opponents. That is how every great poker player in the world does it. And that is what I provide for you at pokercoaching.com, and especially at Poker Coaching Premium. So that's going to be it for today. How long does this sale last? I don't actually know. I think it'll tell you at pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Probably not too long, though. All right. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you have a great holiday season. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at support@pokercoaching.com. I see every single email that comes in because, again, I'm a bit of a perfectionist in that I want to help all of you. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know and we will answer them. All right. Again, check it out, pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Good luck. Have fun. And I'll talk to you all later.